quickly share. I'm going to quickly share what I'm doing so that, yay, because I know others will want to be doing part of this. There we go. Hold on a second. Do you ever sit in your house and you hear, the sound of a truck backing up, beep, beep, beep? Well, we have one of those big trucks that lives on our property. So whenever I hear it, I think that Johan's home. And so I have to stop and listen. And it's like, nope, because I also live in a rural area. So that sound happens all the time, not to mention UPS, the Amazon trucks, the water truck, the propane truck, et cetera, and so forth. So if I had a strange look on my face, it's because I was listening for beeps and to figure out which beep was it. Anyway, hey guys, it is National Raw Feeding Week. So today is the first day. And I know that I did a video yesterday. I deleted it because it was basically an SHIT show. And I just couldn't have that up on my channel anymore. I mean, granted, I am not a big old YouTuber or Facebooker or anything like that. There are plenty of people that are gigantic. I am just a little, fish in the pond. But that doesn't mean I need to put out crappy content, right? So we're doing this again today. Today is day 1 of National Raw Feeding Week. For those of you guys who do not know me, hey, I'm Kimberly. I am a dog mom. I am a raw feeder. I am a pet blogger. And a lot of other things. I'm a comic book movie nerd. I love the X-Files. And lately, like 2020 turned me into a YouTube fanatic where I wake up every single day and watch at least 3 YouTube videos. There are so many creative people on the platform. It's insane. But that is pretty much who I am. So, hey, I started National Raw Feeding Week, and I really should have checked to see when I launched it, but it was several years ago. I was looking at a pet calendar, which I use to plan all the content for my blog. So for instance, we have Easter coming up. And so if I were feeling like it, I might write a post about, the risk of feeding chocolate to dogs. Lucky for me, I already have a post like that on my website. So instead, I'll just share it on Easter Sunday. But those are the type of things that, you look at the pet calendar, and there are holidays that are specific for pets. And in looking at this calendar, the first thing I noticed is that there wasn't anything really about animal nutrition. And this was a topic that has been growing and growing. And it's not just about raw feeding. It's about feeding hybrid diet. So a diet that is part one diet plus another. So kibble and raw, kibble and home cooked, home cooked and raw. Then there's also freeze-dried food, dehydrated food. There's still kibble. And there's raw, and there's home cooked. So I'm surprised that we don't have a day where we all talk about what we're feeding our dogs and how they're doing and share that information. And then when I started really thinking about it, my head got a little big, and I decided, you know what, we need a week because there's a lot to cover in this time. I don't know when this happened, but probably a couple years after I started National Raw Feeding Week, I learned about Rawgust. So the entire month of August is dedicated to raw feeding. Not sure who came up with that one, but the person I heard about it first was Emma Rutherford. She is a nutritionist out of the UK, and she promotes fresh food for pets. So that is sort of like the background of National Raw Feeding Week. So every year for the first week of April, I talk about, basically fresh food for dogs. I used to just talk about raw feeding, but I've calmed down a lot over the years and recognized that not everyone can feed raw. Not every dog can eat raw. And there's a lot to learn about other ways to feed our dogs. But today, I am going to be talking about the exact same thing I spoke about yesterday. So if you were watching me yesterday, sorry for the repeat. But if you weren't, this is going to be fun. I thought I would go over unpopular opinions about raw feeding. But before I get into that, I want to say that National Raw Feeding Week isn't really a keep the tail wagging thing. Yeah, I came up with it, but you know what? Just because I came up with it doesn't mean it belongs to me. Yeah, it kind of does. But, I want other people to join in as well. So before I get through my list, I want to tell you guys, head on over to Real Dog Box. This is a company that offers subscription box for dogs, for treats and chews. And I get 2 boxes a month. 1 box is because I'm a customer and have been a customer for a gazillion years. And 1 box because I'm also an affiliate. So they send me a box to show what they're doing. And I posted a video up on TikTok one day this week that shows everything that I got in March. I think it was 2 days ago that I posted it. Maybe it was yesterday, who knows? But the kind of stuff that they send to you is so amazing. You get to tailor your boxes. So if there are foods, like if you have a dog that does not like fish or is allergic to fish or chicken or whatever, you can tell them, hey, can you not put these things in my box? And boom, they won't. And if you're nervous about, for instance, this is Real Dog Box, so they air dry everything, including bones. If you're nervous about feeding air dry bones, just tell them, I don't feel comfortable with those, and they won't put it in your box. But what I love is that I'm constantly being introduced to new things to give to my dogs. And 1 box is great for a multi-dog home. So for years, I've been getting 1 box a month for about 4 dogs. We went up to 5 dogs. Now we're back down to 4 dogs, but that was only for a year. So I'm going to stick with it's great for a household of 4 big dogs. My dogs weigh between 60 and 70 pounds. They don't get chews every day, but they get chews enough through the month that they can sometimes go through an entire box. But there have been times when I have, stacked up several boxes because I just don't give them chews that often. But it's nice to have, like, for instance, if I'm taking a dog to the vet, Scout has cancer right now, so we're going to the vet every Saturday, and he can have a chew in the back of the car, and it keeps him calm and relaxed while we're going there. Or if I need a break, if I'm cleaning the house, or if I'm just want to actually have some quiet time, the dogs will enjoy a chew then as well. So I give them a chew to satisfy their chew drive, but also to keep those pearly whites beautiful and clean. So that's all I have to say. But Real Dog Box is hosting giveaways this week. One of the giveaways includes my book, and I decided to make it both of my books. Why not? And yes, I do have 2 books on Amazon. Anyway, so let's talk. Hi, Michelle. Hi, Courtney. Hi, Moran. Hi, Diane. Thank you guys for joining me today. So let's talk about unpopular opinions. And please feel free to share yours in the comments. I will bring them up and we'll talk about it. But these are the opinions that we kind of keep to ourselves. We don't share it with other people. Or if we have shared them in the past, we have to deal with all kinds of backlash and crybabiness because it's an unpopular opinion. So my main one, my first one, which is something that I've noticed because as a blogger, I get emails and comments all day, every day from people who are either raw feeders, aspiring raw feeders, new to raw feeding. And one thing that is very common about all of this correspondence is everyone is completely overthinking raw feeding. I mean, yeah. I think it's important that we take it seriously when we take on our dog's diet, when we're basically covering all of their nutrients and making sure that they are eating a nutritious diet and they're thriving. Yeah, we should take that seriously. However, the intenseness that people are taking raw feeding is making people kind of stressed out, is making people walk away from raw feeding because it's just too much. And it's turning a few people into a-holes. I will put it out there. This is all about unpopular opinions, so I'm going to speak my mind. I have received emails from people where they are complaining about a brand. One in particular, a few months ago, a woman sent me an email complaining about a brand because they would not give her the details of the recipe. Now, on their website, they list all of the ingredients in order of amount of what is in one of the products that she was looking at. They just don't list the percentage of each ingredient. And that's what she wanted. And they told her, well, it's a proprietary blend. To her, this smacked as shadiness. And she was like, nope, I am not buying from this company because I have no idea what they're putting in the food. You kind of do because they have it listed. You just don't know how much of each. But it's her dogs, it's her money, that's her right. Where she kind of messed up was reaching out to me and expecting me to be on her side, because this is a brand that I buy from for my dogs. I love them. I have been buying from them for years. I'm not going to put the brand on blast. It's just an example. Well, we had a back and forth, and she ended the back and forth in a really nasty way because, from her opinion, since I wasn't equally outraged as she was, then I don't care about my dogs. And, I'm basically an irresponsible person for promoting this brand, in the rare times that I bring them up because she doesn't like them. Yeah, that's what I mean. We're taking this way too seriously. I'm not saying that you shouldn't care about ingredients or the amount of ingredients because I don't know your dog. Maybe your dog can only have a certain amount of certain things. And so that's why you're concerned. If you have a dog with gut issues, with food sensitivities, if you have a Dalmatian and you have to feed them raw, you want to feed them raw, but it needs to be a low purine raw diet, then yeah, when you're looking at certain products, you're going to want to know how much of things is in the product. Completely understand. But that does not mean that we cancel brands because they don't answer our questions the way we want to. We just basically make the decision of, I don't feel comfortable with that answer. I'm not going to give you my money. And then we move on. Because the beauty of it is that there are a gazillion brands out there for us to buy from. We don't have to buy from just one brand. And keep in mind that what works for one person, me, may not work for another person, the person who sent me the email. That's okay too. We're making this way too complicated. One thing that I always tell myself to keep myself from going there, because even after 8 years of feeding raw, there are times when I start taking it a little too seriously. The way I calm it down is I remember that pre-internet, people were feeding raw and they were doing a wonderful job. Their dogs were thriving. You know, that dog that lived the longest, was it Maggie? And I think she lived to 35 years old or 30 years old. She wasn't eating this, specifically calculated, formulated using software diet. No, it was a simple, easy diet. I mean, there are people who feed their dogs goat's milk for an entire month just to reset their dog's system. That's not a balanced diet, but they're doing something that's working for their dogs. And it doesn't mean that we have to agree with it or that we all have to adopt these things. It just means that this is something that someone else is doing. So that's one. One, I remember that there are people that came before me who did this successfully without all the tools that we're using today. And I can do that too. The second thing that I try to, sorry, my nose is itching. The second thing that I always remind myself is that these are dogs. My dogs eat, last year and, 2019, I couldn't stop Apollo from eating slugs. Each of my dogs, each of the dogs that live in the house now, only Sydney managed to avoid this because she was a lady. Each of my dogs went through a period of time where they ate their own poop. Yeah, that was fun. And my dogs, Apollo killed and ate a rabbit in front of me last year. That was horrifying. A few years ago, my dogs were snacking on a dead rabbit for days before I figured out what they were going to the edge of the property to do and buried it. I mean, my dogs eat horse poop. They eat deer poop. Thank God they don't eat the bear poop. But yeah, we do have a black or brown bear in the area. But our dogs can get into some gross, creepy, icky stuff. So I don't want to argue with people about what we feed our dogs. I don't want to argue with people about bacteria because our dogs sometimes eat their poop. So that's what I do. So yes, I'm seeing some unpopular, Barb says, I started raw feeding dogs about 3 months ago. Yay. After 4 out of 5 dogs get sick on a new bag of kibble, I'm sorry, switch them right over to raw and they've done amazing. That is great news. I love that because when I first started, I was terrified of doing cold turkey because I thought I would break my dog. Some dogs do great on cold turkey. Sometimes don't. I'm just gathering because every dog is unique. But every single dog that I've had since Scout or Rodrigo and Sydney, I've switched to raw cold turkey with no problems and they're all doing fantastic. Diane says, I'm getting beat up because my old girl's lab results just got them. Vet said kidney function is failing at an accelerated rate. Oh, I'm so sorry, Diane. That has got to be horrible. I am so sorry. Ruby says, unpopular opinion. Complete and balance is really a marketing term. Yes, it is. Oh my gosh. If I hear one more person say, I shouldn't say here, if I read one more person say, is this complete and balanced? When they're talking about like food that we're getting from a local farm or from a butcher. It's like, are you kidding me? The whole reason why we're feeding raw is to get away from these trigger terms or these marketing terms like complete and balanced and AFCO approved. I mean, it doesn't mean anything, at least not to me, because when it comes down to, and this is my second unpopular opinion, so thank you, Ruby, balance is BS. And yes, I have 2 videos on YouTube about that. One is my initial video, which caught some flack from a certain group that believes in science. And then I did a follow-up video responding to that group. But yeah, I got some nasty emails for a few days from people who said I was so irresponsible for saying balance is BS. Well, let me explain why I believe that. And for some of you guys who've followed me for a while, you guys have heard this rant many times, but let me just go through it again because I love it. Balance according to whom? And this is a statement that I got from a good friend of mine, Krista Powell of Vibrant Canine. It's a raw food company down in Southern California. And it really makes you stop because it's like, what are you balancing towards? Who told you to do this? So we have people who are balancing to NRC. We have people who are balancing to PDF. We have people who are balancing to AFCO. We have people who are balancing over time. There are people who think 80-10-10 is balance. You know, there are people who want to use software to come up with a balanced diet. There are people who are using meal formulators to a balanced diet. But ultimately, we're all using many ways and many raw feeding models to reach this magical balance place. The problem is every single dog is different. So what represents balance for one dog does not mean balance for another dog. And then if we can just take away like all of the I don't know, organizations that are giving us data for dogs. And by the way, never been a study, or I should say, never been a long-term study on dogs to determine when it comes to raw feeding, what they need in their diet to meet this balance figure. So we're basing a lot of this stuff on kibble diets. So, but when it comes down to it, every dog is unique. When we go down the balance rabbit hole, we also have to remember that all the animals that land in our dogs' bowls, balance depends on how they were raised and what they were fed as well. And then overall, soil isn't as nutritious today as it was, like, say, 100 years ago or 200 years ago. And so if the soil isn't nutritious, that means the animals that are eating, that are the grass-fed animals, aren't getting as nutritious grass, and which makes their meat not as nutritious. The crops and everything that are grown in this not as nutritious soil aren't as nutritious, and so on and so forth. Basically, it can make your head explode. And I see this all the time with people contacting me and wanting to know how to balance things. I don't do that. I don't worry about that. I don't follow instructions on things that I do. You know, I look at the like, for instance, on supplements, I look at what they say we are supposed to give our dogs, and I just assume, yes, ass out of you and me, blah, let's say, I just guess that a lot of these serving instructions are based on kibble-fed dogs. If we're feeding a raw-fed dog, I figure my dog is already healthy, so they don't need as much of the supplement as a kibble-fed dog. I could be wrong, I could be right, but ultimately, it's all a guessing game, and we're all doing the best we can. So this is what I do. I focus on just making my dog's diet as nutritious as possible. I like to alternate the main protein in my dog's diet every week because every protein brings something unique and a different, you know, amount of every nutrient to the bowl. And, you know, like pork is a nutritious protein. So if your dog can eat it and you can source it, it definitely should be part of the dog's diet. Same thing with rabbit, despite the fact that it's insanely expensive here. But yeah, it's a very nutritious meat, especially if you have a dog that has food sensitivities. Rabbit is a good protein. But so that's what I'm saying. I do it. I believe in balance over time. I know there are people out there that think that that's not possible. I actually think it is. And I believe in keeping it simple. So when I feed my dogs, I start with a base of 80-10-10, and then I add Dr. Harvey's paradigm, which I alternate occasionally with raw vibrants. This is a base mix. And basically it's there to help you cover more nutrients. So you don't have to think, you're not spending hundreds of dollars on all these different supplements or foods trying to create this balanced diet, and you're ending up with 18 ingredients in the bowl in your attempt to do this. I just use Dr. Harvey's paradigm. And then I add in sardines a couple times a week, oysters for zinc, once a week or so, or sometimes I add it into the meal prep. I add in my own veggie mix, which is great for antioxidants and additional nutrients, natural source of fiber, and so on and so forth. It's really easy. I promise you guys. I think the people that raw feeding would be difficult for are people who just do not have the sources that many of us do have. I mean, I live in the Pacific Northwest. I'm very lucky to live in an area where I know farmers who they raise their own meat and they give me the organ meat for free. Love that. This is all grass-fed animals, and this stuff is not easily available to people depending upon where they are around the world or even in this country. So that's that. I want to make sure I don't lose you guys. Yeah, Ruby says most vets don't know about fresh food. You know what? That is very true. What I find is that vets are still struggling with this, but they are turning around. I have been able to change the mind of several vets, with one exception. Man, she was a tool. But when it comes to raw feeding, by simply explaining to them what I feed my dogs, how I determine what I'm going to feed my dogs and when, and then how I double check, which I do with Parsley Pet. That is a nutrient testing, blueprint testing, where you basically take hair trimmings, send them off to them. They send it to a lab and they give you back. In fact, I have them here, reports for how your dog is doing. And to let you know, I do this every other year. Let me find out. There we go. Here is the score on Rodrigo's report. Oh, do you guys see it? There we go. Excellent. Yay, excellent. So my dogs are doing good. With the way I'm feeding my dogs, I'm confident. I don't think it needs to be complicated. If you want to do more, if you want to calculate things, if you want to create your own spreadsheet, if you want to use a meal formulation software or service, go for it. I think we all should go the path that makes the best sense for us without shaming each other and without putting pressure on each other to do anything differently. The goal is that we want to raise happy, healthy dogs. And however we get there, enjoy the journey. Okay, what else do we got here? Yay. And then we got more cold turkey that dogs are doing great. I love you guys. You guys are awesome. So Stephanie says, I work at a holistic pet store and we teach people where they are at. Love that. We are having good responses with just adding raw to their kibble. Don't get me wrong. We have a huge customer base that only feeds raw, so much so that we are getting more freezers. Congratulations. It's a win for us if we can get them started some way or another. And Stephanie, thank you so much for bringing that up, because this is something that I mentioned yesterday that I love. And this is not an unpopular opinion. This is just fact. There is a woman that I know named Lauren Grow, and she owns a pet store down in Redlands, California called Furry Face. And she is a person who I learned that phrase where you meet them where they at. You meet your customers where they are, rather than trying to force people to, like, if someone comes into your store and is looking for a good bag of kibble and you're trying to force them into feeding raw, whether it be just by refusing to answer their questions about kibble, shaming them because they're not feeding kibble, or pressuring them to switch to, or shame them because they're not feeding raw, or pressuring them into feeding raw, you're not going to get there. You're just going to lose a customer. And then you might even risk getting a bunch of negative comments because they're so unhappy about the service. I have learned, and I say this as a person who, I don't feel that I intentionally bullied or shamed anyone, but I'm pretty sure that unintentionally, I probably offended a lot of people when I first started feeding raw and promoting raw, because I was so excited. I mean, it was sort of like being a born again Christian. You're so excited about this great diet. I had a dog that my vet said wouldn't live long past his third birthday, and he was thriving. I mean, just like that, most of his health issues vanished within the first 2 weeks of feeding a partial raw diet. I was feeding raw in the morning, kibble in the evening. And today, he's 11 years old. So this dog that was supposed to die somewhere after his third birthday is now 11 years old, and he's still doing fantastic. And I love it. And I credit that to a raw food diet. So yeah, I got a little bit excited. And so I may have stepped on some toes back then. But when it comes to feeding raw, I know that no one wants to be embarrassed or shamed or made to feel like they're hurting their dog because they've chosen not to go down the raw path. Or maybe they're just still taking their time and educating themselves. Everyone needs to take this at the speed that works for them because they're the ones that know their life, their budget, and their dog. I don't. You don't. We all do the best that we can. And I love the idea of meeting people where they are. And the people, in my opinion, who are at the front line of this are independent pet store owners and employees, because you get to know these people over the years and you know about their dog and you can talk to them. And so, and you can start them by just introducing them to a higher quality kibble and then showing them some things like healthier treats, natural treats, or things that they can add to their kibble. Bone broth, coconut oil, canned sardines, canned oysters, vegetables, pureed vegetables, and so on and so forth. So there's that. And then over the years, you can slowly introduce them to more and more things. As people see the improvements in their dog's diet, they're going to be excited to take the next step, and then the step after that, and step after that. And during all that time, you have created a loyal customer because you've been with them all the way. And that's how I feel about the pet stores that I go to. I am a loyal customer because they've been with me through my journey. So I love that. Thank you for sharing. Michelle says, it's an ongoing learning process. Totally agree. We're all in the same boat and no one has all the answers. Common sense, comfort level, and research. Perfectly said. Thank you, Michelle. This is one of those things where it always cracks me up when in raw feeding groups, and this is why I rarely speak up in raw feeding groups, but in raw feeding groups, people get so like, this, I know everything and I'm going to tell you the truth, especially like when people post a picture, they're new to a group. I've seen this so many times. They post a picture of their dogs and maybe their dogs are overweight. And then you have the people come in there and just start shaming them for their fat dogs. And it's just sort of like, I wonder, and I've even asked people this, do you honestly think that you're helping them by shaming them and by attacking them? And a lot of people will be like, well, if I shame them and attack them enough, they may leave this group, but they'll, I would have made a difference, and they'll start looking at their dog. And I'm like, yeah, but you can accomplish that without having them leave the group by just being nice and kind and asking questions. Because to be honest, none of us are experts. We don't know each other. We don't know each other's dogs. We just are interacting on a social media platform. Why do we have to be jerks to each other? Why can't we just accept that we are all beginners at one point in time? We all screwed up or made mistakes at one point in time. We're constantly learning, and everything that we're doing today can be flipped up on its head 5 years from now because new information has come out. So just understand, I always say that raw feeding is a marathon. It's not a sprint. We're constantly learning. Everything is constantly changing. And I think the more the pet industry embraces the fact that pet parents want to feed healthier food, want natural options, the more, the more we may see people doing studies and putting out better information. And that's how we're going to learn more. So I'm laughing at Diane. Oh my God. Maybe BARF should stand for Born Again Raw Feeder. So true. I love that. I love that. Zaza, as a dog groomer of 45 years, wow. As a dog groomer for 45 years and have learned to feed raw in that time, I always try to access the best diet for the person's budget and lifestyle and their acceptance of raw feeding. And that is absolutely true. Because, for instance, depending upon where you live, certain proteins are going to be just ridiculous. So if someone were to tell someone, like for me, if someone were to tell me that I had to feed my dogs rabbit, they needed rabbit in their diet at least once a month, it's not going to happen. Where I live, rabbit costs between $5 and $8 a pound. I try to keep my budget at $3 or less a pound. So I do stock up on rabbit here and there, but it's usually because, oh, I got a little extra money through the blog. So thank you guys for supporting my blogging. I can stock up on some rabbit. But otherwise, if it weren't for the blog, I would not be feeding rabbit unless I raised it myself. And I am simply not at the level of raw feeding where I'm ready to dispatch of an animal. I just can't do it right now. So now back to my list, because I have a list. The next thing, unpopular opinions. I don't believe that veterinarians are in it for the money. I don't believe that veterinarians just want to shoot up our dogs with vaccines because they get a ton of kickbacks from, what is it, the pharmaceutical companies. I don't believe that veterinarians are pushing kibble onto our dogs because they're getting tons of kickbacks from kibble companies. If this truly were the case, why are so many veterinarians in such debt because of their education? You would think that they would be able to get out of debt their first year in a practice because of all these supposed kickbacks that they're getting. And I'm not to say that there might be some veterinarians that are getting something. I don't know. I'm not a veterinarian. I just don't buy the excuse where whenever we talk about veterinarians, we start talking about, basically that they have a ton of people. They're in the pockets of a ton of people and they don't really care about our animals. The amount of time that they spend in college, the amount of money that they spend for that education, and the fact that I know many veterinarians that are working multiple jobs, I don't think that they are as shady as people like to paint. And it drives me crazy when I am in a group and vet bashing is allowed. In fact, I will leave a group where people are allowed to just attack veterinarians as a profession. Now, if you have an opinion with an individual veterinarian, that's between you and your vet. But as a community, especially a profession where the suicide rate is insane, I think that veterinarians deserve a lot more respect. And there is a YouTube video, it's a TED Talk that you can find on YouTube about like a veterinarian shares what her life is like as a veterinarian. And it is truly eye-opening. And I watched that video, and after that, I have kept my mouth shut. I mean, there are going to be veterinarians out in the world that I'm not a fan of, that I don't agree with, and all of that is fine. But I am no longer going to participate in the discussion that attacks veterinarians, because they got a lot going on already. They don't need, the peanut gallery piping up, sharing things that we don't really know and that aren't facts. And it's not cool, because I think it encourages more and more people to disrespect veterinarians as a whole, and we need them. I mean, we need our veterinarians. Right now, I have a dog with cancer. I need my oncologist. It doesn't matter to me that she isn't supportive of raw feeding. What matters to me is that she's keeping my dog alive and she's doing a kick-ass job. I don't care about the rest. And I think that as we gain in confidence as raw feeders, whenever someone comes to us and tells us, yeah, I'm not a fan of raw feeding, we can talk and explain to them why it's a good option for our dogs. I mean, my oncologist hasn't tried to she hasn't demanded that I stop feeding raw. She just gave me the risk. She gave me the information based on what she knows. And I made a decision to me, which was like my compromise was to switch Scout to Answer's pet food, because Answers has dealt with the bacteria issue through fermentation. And I'm comfortable with that. And then once a month, I do cook his food, but that's because there's one chemo treatment that is pretty heavy on him. And so after that chemo treatment, I just feed him cooked food, mostly because to baby him a little bit, because I know he had a rough day, not because I'm afraid of feeding him Answers. So I'm just going through and seeing what you guys, unpopular opinion, food is medicine. How can that possibly be unpopular? And I guess it would be for people who don't get that, but it is interesting. Like for instance, I used to love gum. I had gum every day. I would buy it from Costco because I had gum that often. And then I spoke with a nutritionist who told me, and I don't remember what she said, but she explained to me why gum was not good. And she is a person who loves gum as well. And after speaking to her, I never chewed gum again. I leave it alone. So if you want to check out this nutritionist, she's a human nutritionist. She's on Facebook as Twisted Veggies, and she's pretty brilliant. I love her page. But yeah, food is medicine. I mean, it's amazing the things that when we don't treat ourselves this way, but many of us in the raw food community understand this with our dogs. For instance, if they say that if your dog has liver issues, then I don't even know if it's liver, but there are certain things that if your dog has issues with this, you should feed them this food. And, when you look at food energetics, it covers a lot of that, about how to feed your dog based on their health. traditional Chinese medicine is big on this. But yeah, food is medicine. Yeah, Michelle says, I was a vet tech for 23 years, and none of the vets I worked for were in it for the money. They were all doing it to help animals. Chemo is hard on the body and tummy. It is hard on the body for humans, but actually, surprisingly, chemo, dogs and cats even more can tolerate chemo a lot better than humans can. And one of the reasons why is because the protocol, the CHOP protocol that Scout is on, was derived from a human protocol of the same name. The difference is I think the human protocol is like a week or 2 weeks, whereas for the dog, it's 6 months. So it's so much easier, and dogs respond to it really well. Scout is doing amazingly. Of course, there are going to be outliers where dogs have trouble with it. So I never want to say that every single dog is going to be fine, but I can share that Scout is doing amazingly. He's already in remission, and he's doing great. So I'm grateful that we have this path, because I don't trust myself to try and treat cancer naturally. I don't know enough, and I don't want to fall into the bad habit of leaning on social media and Google to figure out how to, cure my dog of cancer. And I use air quotes because there is no cure for lymphoma. Or I should say there are very, very few dogs that walk away cancer free. Okay, so another one. Oh, I already ranted about balance. Too many unqualified people doing meal formulation. Have you noticed that every single person on the planet now offers meal formulation services? And yes, I'm exaggerating, but it does seem like a lot of people are doing this. And I don't hate it. I'm not doing it because I do not have the qualifications to do something like this. It doesn't matter that I paid for the software. I'm not qualified. Because if you come to me and it turns out your dog has some health issue that I know nothing about or how to address, I can end up doing more harm than good. And so I don't want to offer the service. I don't mind sharing recipes. I don't mind taking your recipe and running it through the software and seeing where it can be improved and leaving it up to you if you want to follow that advice or not. But I will not charge for it for a service. I'm just not qualified. However, there are a lot of people out there who are very much qualified. They're taking it upon themselves to get educated on all areas of animal nutrition so they can respond to these things. They are partnering with veterinarians, and there are veterinarians, Dr. Lori Koger being the main one, who also offer meal formulation services. So I just want to say with this, buyer beware. If you are going with someone, if you're in like a raw feeding group and this is something that they offer, if you're on one of your favorite raw feeding websites and this is a service that they offer, make sure you understand where their background is, where their information is coming from, and that if you pay for meal formulation, you actually get recipes that you can use. I have heard horror stories about one meal formulation person. So I'm not going to say it's everyone. It's one in particular where she will take people's money. She charges a lot of money, a couple $100, I think upwards of $300. And she returns with it would be like me saying, do you want me to formulate meals for you? Okay, you pay me. And then I'm not going to ask you about like what you have access to, what you can source in your area, what your budget is like, what your dog can and cannot eat. I'm just going to send you, a handful of recipes. And then when you come back to me and tell me, I don't have access to goat, rabbit is too expensive, my dog is allergic to chicken. Instead of me going, oh my God, I'm so sorry, I really should have created recipes that were tailored to your dog. I'm just going to say, well, if you want to pay me more money, then I'll tailor them to your dog. And that is just insane. So buyer beware. If you're not working with someone who is a professional, who has a business where they do that and they are educating themselves and staying top on the education, or a veterinarian who does this, really, really ask them about what their background is. Ask them about, what will you offer me? What if I can't use the recipe? Is there a money back, or can I get a different recipe? Make sure you know what you're doing. And since we're talking about it, I am going to recommend 3 people who I would trust to formulate meals, and so that I would recommend to you. The first is Dr. Lori Koger of Healthy Dog Workshop. The second would be Scott J. Marshall II of, Raw Feeding 101 and Dog Dad Official. He has one of the biggest groups on Facebook, raw feeding groups on Facebook, Raw Feeding 101. And then Ronnie Lejeune of Perfectly Rawsome and Raw Feeding University. So those are the three people that I have on my blog where I recommend to others. And that if you ask me, that's who I would go to. And then finally, let's be honest with people who are new to raw and accept that, yeah, for some people, raw feeding can be expensive. It drives me bonkers when I'm in a group and I see someone talking about how, they want to feed raw, but they can't really afford it. And so they're waiting so they can afford it. And instead of people offering suggestions on how they can cut costs and, basically leading them in a discussion of, okay, so what's available to you? Do you have this in your area? Have you tried this? Have you considered this? Instead of people doing that, people are basically just gaslighting them and telling them, no, it's not expensive. And you go to the vet less often and blah, blah, blah. No, for some people, raw feeding is expensive. I have 4 big dogs. I spend on average about $200 to $250 a month. And so that's me taking my 12 months of feeding raw, dividing it into 12 and telling you this is an average. In reality, 4 times a year, I spend about $1,000 on raw food. I stock up 2 freezers and a fridge full of all the things that I need. And then I feed my dogs over that time, adding a little things here and there during 3 months. And then I do it again. And it's not always $1,000. Sometimes it's, $500. But that's basically, oh crap, I got to go meet my girlfriend. So I'm going to wrap this up. So that's basically what my budget is like. And if I were, when I tell people, oh, I spend on average $200 a month for 4 big dogs, the average person is going to be like, oh, well, that's not bad. I have 1 big dog. So that basically means that I will spend about $50 a month. But in reality, if I were to start telling people, well, every, 3 to 4 months, I spend about $1,000. How many people do you think would be like, oh, perfectly reasonable? I mean, even me, when I first started looking into feeding raw, I was like, this is crazy expensive. I can't afford this. Why? Because I was looking at commercial raw that is shipped to your door, like the most expensive raw on the planet. Because me, I didn't even consider the fact that I didn't do it myself. Not even crossed my mind. But, we live and we learn. But raw feeding can be expensive. And yes, we do go to the vet less often. I mean, I do, because with Rodrigo, he was in and out of the vet all the time. But I know plenty of people who feed their dogs a kibble diet who rarely go to the vet because their dogs just don't need to go to the vet. So that's not really a draw for a lot of people. So if you're talking to someone who hasn't been to the vet in 2 years because their dog has been doing fine, that's not really a way to convince them that raw feeding is more affordable. So instead, let's start, what was said earlier, meet people where they are and try to understand what their daily life is like so that we can then give them suggestions on what they can do to cut the budget. Otherwise, it's not going to work for everyone. Oh, and then the last thing, which I didn't write down, but this is a good one too, unpopular opinion. Raw isn't for everyone, whether it be the dog or the human. It's not for everyone. And guess what? That's okay. It's not necessary to bully people into switching their dogs to a raw diet. Let people figure out what they want to do and where they want to go. And I say that as someone who I don't feel that I was bullying people, but I'm curious about the person on the other side of our little discussions, how they felt. But now I just mind my own damn business and focus on my dogs. I know what my dogs need, what I'm doing for my dogs. I'm going to stick with that and stop trying to tell other people what they should or should not be doing. That's on them. So, yep. And here we go. Ronnie rocks. Use their service based on your recommendation. I'm glad you had a good experience with her. I'm going to tell you guys now, Ronnie Lejeune is probably, as a person who's not a veterinarian or a veterinarian nutritionist, she is a dog trainer by profession. She is probably one of the most knowledgeable people that I know when it comes to dog nutrition and raw feeding. You cannot go wrong by following Raw Feeding University or Perfectly Rawsome. Same thing with Scott and Raw Feeding 101. Raw Feeding 101 is a group that has so many amazingly experienced and cool people, and it's a low drama group. Their admins are on the ball. So definitely great resources. And yes, and I do have a co-op list on my site, and I'm working on my raw feeder directory. I'm crazy behind on my blog, so I apologize for everyone who submitted a listing for the directory. It hasn't happened, but it will someday, I promise. So that is it for day 1 of National Raw Feeding Week. Thank you so much for joining me on this little journey that we're doing. Every single day, I will have something different planned. I have no idea what it is because I basically just am planning this on the fly because I am so flipping behind. But it's going to be a fun week. And just remember, follow Real Dog Box. You can follow them over on Instagram, which is where I follow them. And they are having giveaways. And so you will have a lot of fun over there as well. Thank you guys for joining me today. I really appreciate it. Have a fantastic day. And I will see you guys tomorrow. Bye.